Everyone, welcome to Impact 2020 Allyship and Solidarity. My name is Shaina Salvaraju.
My name is Tamvu. Before we begin, we would like to go over the landing agreement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the territory of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Scatito, Golden Hill Pagasit, Nipmuc, and Lenape peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We thank them for their strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example.
For those of you who are not familiar with Impact, we highly recommend that you watch our introductory video, which explains what the conference is and the theme for this year. We are thankful that you took the time out of your day to listen to these conversations and look forward to hearing your thoughts about them. Welcome to Impact 2020, you guys. We're really happy that you're here. Today's conversation is going to be the LGBTQ plus experience in the context of allyship and solidarity. And today we have Matthew Wan as our facilitator, so we will pass it on to him.
Hi, welcome to the discussion. My name is Matthew Wan. You can use whatever pronouns you'd like. I was the former president of Queer Asians and Allies, and I identify as agender. I majored in molecular and cell biology, and I'm lucky enough to have graduated in spring of 2020.
Hi, my name is Justin Hong. I am a junior here at UConn. I major in intersectionality and health. My previous experience for this is I am a gay male Asian American, and I wanted to get to know more about other people's experiences and what allyship stands for other people within this community. Popcorn, May.
Hello, my name's May. I'm a sophomore and I major in molecular and cell biology. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I joined this conversation because I want to learn more about this topic, as my knowledge of this topic is very limited. And I'm gonna popcorn to Harmony.
Hi, I'm Harmony. I'm a third year Chinese major here at UConn, and my experiences with this community is that I'm a lesbian Vietnamese American person, and I wanted to expand my perspective upon this community and to gain more knowledge about it. I'll popcorn to Ramisa.
Hi, I'm Ramisa Hussain, and I'm a sophomore computer science major here at UConn. And my previous experience with this topic is that I am a bisexual Bengali American citizen. And also, I just want to get more connected and learn more about this topic as well.
All right, with introductions out of the way, I'd like to get started on the initial discussions. Why don't we start more with a more general question of how are perhaps LGBT people viewed within the Asian American communities?
I can start. So for my, I'm also Vietnamese American, as similar with Harmony. So I think we have one general term for anybody who's not heterosexual or on the gender binary of assigned birth, sex, and gender, and that's the word is bare. And it's a very negative connotation that kind of really just means you're gay and you're not normal. And so my experience, I have not really met a lot of in at least my circles of people that I know from friends and family of really openly LGBT plus identifying individuals. And it's very much so a thing if you're not acting like you should be, you're going to be called bare. For me, I don't have the most masculine tendencies, and my dad would say, oh, what are you, gay? And because that's loosely the translation, or it would kind of be a shameful thing and it'd be used just a derogatory term. And it's very much so if you're not seen as what you should be, then you're going to be labeled as that derogatory term. So I don't really have that many personal interactions with other Vietnamese gay people who are even older or around my age, because I don't really have that much experience, and it's been very much so seen as something that's a joke, honestly.
So Johnson, I really thought that was interesting, because in terms of perhaps the more mainstream, um, the mainstream view of how queer people understand themselves is through community, right? And community has been central in the queer identity. Can you tell us more about maybe how else your development has deviated from what might be seen as the traditional development here in the US?
I mean, if you talk about like community-wise, like I've had to look outside of my own like ethnic community a lot of the times. Like when I was in high school, especially in my hometown of East Hartford, it wasn't really talked about if you were gay or not. And it was kind of like a very niche, like you knew who exactly was and who wasn't, or who was just like really in the closet, but like no one really made a big out statement about it, or at least that's what my experience was. And so when I went to UConn, that's kind of when I was able to expose myself a lot more to a lot of these other communities that I felt more connected to. And especially concerning my sophomore year, I lived in gender inclusive housing, and that's kind of where I got a lot of my community. That I found a lot of people who understood similar enough to my own experience, and like helped me really solidify my identity and find that like I'm normal. I am not something to be seen as abnormal or a joke, and my identity matters, and this is who I am. And that has kind of led to me being able to come out to my parents. And strangely enough, like I was expecting a lot of like negative reactions, but my stepmom, who is my mom, is recently immigrated, and she was very much like, that's okay, I still love you as my son and accept you, and like I don't really care about that. And that was really what I was not expecting from her. And that was different to like find community in my family. And even my dad, like as much as he's always made jokes about it, he was like, okay, I'm not even worried about that. Because the context in which I came out had a lot of other things to do, and he was more so concerned about like academics and how that would play in with like a relationship that I was having and like affecting it. So he didn't really even care about that. So it was kind of the opposite of what I was expecting, especially from my internal family unit. But then definitely like having it seen, like they would tell me like, don't tell anybody else though, we don't want the other people in the like larger community, because like we in our family understand and we'll like accept you, even though they don't really talk about it. But they don't want anybody else talking because like everyone else will talk, and that's totally different because that's outside the family and that can't be controlled. And I guess that has to do with like saving face, because I'm also, traditionally speaking, I'm the eldest son. So that means like I have this responsibility to carry on the family line or be the face of the family after my dad.
Thank you, Johnson. I'm sure that was really personal for you. Does anyone else want to share any sort of how the narrative of their narrative as a queer Asian American person may be different from the traditional, perhaps white American narrative?
I definitely relate to Johnson, maybe in a different kind of way, but I've tried to come out to my mother. Like, I know my father would never accept me, so there's no question of even trying to come out to him, and we don't really talk, maybe like once a month. On another note, I'm an immigrant, and I haven't lived with my family in about 3 to 4 years right now. So I don't really talk to my father, and I've never thought about coming out to my father because he just doesn't know me really and wouldn't understand anything about me. Coming out to my mother though, every time I try, she takes it as a joke. She's like, oh, you're kidding. The Americans have changed you. But even then, the whole what will people say, I don't want people to talk about you, so just act normal, has really also played upon me, like just staying closeted to my family. I'm out to my friends right now, but definitely not the Bengali community as a whole. There was a discussion at UConn where the BSA did hold a discussion, and I think I came out to the Bangladeshi community here at UConn very recently, like a week ago. So there's that, but definitely growing up in an Asian American family, it has led me to just stay closeted and no hope of just coming out at all, because you know they are going to kick you out of the family if you are anything other than normal.
Yeah, I definitely feel myself personally that the traditional narrative for white queer folk in the US is to come out and to, fully express yourself. We definitely see that with like Love Simon. Um, but for me as well, I just don't necessarily feel that need. Um, there is a way for me to be myself that doesn't necessarily mean everyone has to know absolutely everything about me. So in that sort of vein, how has your being an LGBT person kind of influenced the way you interact with your family in a way maybe other Asians and Asian American people haven't may not be able to relate to?
So, in a way that like is kind of very relatable, like as you said, Matthew, like the white like kind of narrative of like coming out is like you can do it in a way, like it's expected, and for us, it's more so as like when we share like it's difficult, especially when there's a language barrier involved, because all the time like there's not all the words, and I had to like go about describing like if because one of my partners is non-binary, and I had to describe it's like when you are born a male but you don't think or feel like you are, and like and it was really difficult to describe, and then like I think like for interactions like I have to act like I have to put myself basically back in the closet when I interact with like other people, and it's like I have to now like put on this mask of like, okay, time to show myself as like this masculine like person, when like all of my aunts or like other uncles will like, do you have a girlfriend or anything like that, I have to like lie and it's like, no, I'm more focused on my studies and like I don't have time for that, even though like I'm in a very committed relationship and I can't really share that like outright. And honestly, the people in my family who do more so know about my partners are like, oh, they're just really good friends, like they just live together and they're really good friends, and they were roommates. But it's really difficult, and I think a lot of people outside of like the Asian American community can relate to at least like having to put up false airs. But it's difficult because like whatever you do, people will talk about. And in like my experience, the Asian community, like word travels fast, and we're all very connected because our networks are so much stronger due to having immigrated and only having that language or cultural values that people share. And like it only takes like one person, and that like be the wrong person to share to, and then everyone else knows, and the next thing you know, like your family is facing that backlash. And sometimes they come off of like, I wanted to protect you from this, and other times it's like, wow, this you're now like the black sheep or disgrace of the family. And it's really difficult because like I want to share a part of this with myself, in the sense of like going to UConn, I've been so much more open about it, and like, yeah, I use he they pronouns, I'm gay, I have partners, but then like when I come home, it's like I'm a different person.
May some of our members here have shared some of their experiences with their family and some of the homophobia they've experienced in their unit. I wonder if you would share anything that you've observed perhaps in your family or your community that sort of reflects that.
I don't identify as lesbian or anything, just like I identify as female, so I use like she, hers. But I guess like I'm Chinese American, so like in my family's really, really traditional, and like I could tell like the stress like people who identify as something else like go through, because just with my family, I don't have any close relatives that like are part of the queer community. However, like I heard of my mom mentioning like a very distant relative, how their eldest son was identified as gay, and then my mom will always tell me like, don't be like their family. Like I hope no one in our family is like ever part of the queer community, and then like just don't interact with that family. And she'll also say how like she feels bad for that family, like, oh my god, their eldest son is gay, like how is he gonna carry the last name of his family to the next generation? And like I feel like it's very upsetting to hear, because I also see like I have friends that are part of the queer community, and like I try to explain to my parents, but you'll like when your parents are really traditional with their ideas, you have thought that it's really hard to convince them to think otherwise. So it's just like brush over the topic kind of thing.
I would say my experiences are kind of similar to May's. Like, they're not like directly homophobic. It's more like emphasis of like homophobic. Yeah, like my brother would do would like he would just have he likes to have scented candles and like to have like the airwick thing. But like my dad would be like, okay, this is too girly, and it would be like a bad thing. But I feel like it's my dad that's more a little bit homophobic. My family doesn't really talk about these topics, mostly because I don't really talk to my family at all. I really talk to my family about a lot of things, but a little bit homophobic in certain ways. And like my dad had an idea of masculinity that like he thinks like, oh, there's only one way to be masculine. And what else? Oh yeah, my mom doesn't really talk to me about anything homophobic much, other than like I think she thinks that being gay is an illness at times. I can't really remember like when she said this, but I do recall that she thinks that being gay or being like lesbian is an illness. Yeah.
I noticed May mentioned that her family thinks of the traditional family unit, and Ramasa also brought up that her parents bring up how she's been Americanized and that she isn't really bisexual. As Asian peoples and Asian Americans, I know a lot of our cultures hold traditionality as really important, but at the same time, we know that homosexuality, gender, and perhaps non-binary genders are present throughout many cultures, if not every culture, right? And in some background research, in Chinese culture, for example, homosexuality has been like accepted, not really commented on up to like the Qing dynasty. In Vietnamese culture, it's the same. It hasn't really been brought up at all. I wonder how you guys take this discrepancy between historical acceptance of queer people in our communities against the idea that a traditional marriage and a traditional gender expression is within these lines that conveniently align with Western ideas.
I'm not sure if this is completely right, but I think the now created heteronormative society that is the Asian American society is because of Western ideals. I think up until like Qing dynasty or the modern age, it was like kind of accepted, but like in the shadows and like hidden, but still like not like seen as abnormal. But like when Western culture started the whole marriages between females and males, it became more common also in the Asian American society. And then it was just thought to be the only way to go. And now that the Western society is reverting that and going back to accepting people, the Asian American society is still holding on to the whole marriages between a female and a male, and there's only two genders.
I also feel like with the movement of Christianity and Catholicism also brings this boundaries of two genders in a lot of ways. And like before like India was like colonized, there's definitely been more than like two genders. And after India was like colonized by British, that brought up a lot of like homophobia and what else, like maybe like honor killings and other like hate crimes, and a lot of internalized homophobia as well, and hatred. Well, the term homosexuality and heterosexuality was both fairly new terms. I think they are coined in like the 1920s, but I feel like heterosexuality or like the marriage bond between a man and a woman is more seen back then just because of like economically and financially it's better to have kids and then you want children. So like I guess there were like homosexual couples back then, but they're not like as you don't see them represented as much as like marriage between man and woman. Yeah.
As Harmony puts, like I think it was section 377 that was overturned I think back in 2018 or something, that like kind of got rid of a lot of colonial ideas in India, as Harmony mentioned, from like the British colonies, like that brought forward like these taboo ideas that it can only be between a man and a woman, and anything outside of that is considered immoral. And along with like Catholicism and Christianity, that kind of like moral standpoint can be used as like that justification, but then it also comes down to like economic power as well. And this is something that like you see across a lot of different non-European like colonies. It's like before colonization, like the idea was not as taboo. It might not have been talked about, but it was not something that was criminalized. And I was looking a little bit through like Vietnamese history. It's like there's not been a lot of history rates of like criminalization for like homosexuality or things like that, but it's like nowadays it's more seen as like taboo and like don't talk about it, you shouldn't be this way. And that heteronormity like binary that the world's been like put into has a lot to do with like Western views and like Western religion, because it's very much so like historically those two have been used as like ways to influence and maintain power. And that kind of like conversation of power kind of like goes along with like our identity is like being queer and LGBTQ plus is already marginalized, and then adding on top like it's very niche to use the word like Asian American identity, because we're seen as like the model minority, so we are ethnic and like non-white people, but we're so close that like it can be ignored our own struggles too in a lot of like circumstances.
One specific case of like being accepted in the Asian community and then going from being accepted and like and not being accepted is the case of hijras in specifically India and Bangladesh. They are called hijras, but they're actually either transgender people or intersex people, or they're called a third gender. And they were like worshipped at one point. They were thought to be really like they brought good health, they brought like prosperity, wealth, like just anything positive. If you like gave them money and like if you treated them well, they would like give you good luck basically. But over the years they have been like, that has like went away. It's like now a myth, and now they're just treated poorly and they have to like beg for money. And they're just seen as like every negative thing you can say on the book. And every time anybody sees them, like any normal person sees them, they're like, oh, like don't talk to them, don't look at them. If you don't look at them, they won't come pester you. So like just going from being worshipped to like just yeah.
Sorry, just an interruption. Ramasa, you used the word normal in contrast to the Hijra people. I wonder, how did you learn to define what normal is, and what did you mean by that when you said it?
So when people say normal in Bangladesh or in that Indian subcontinent, they mean if you're born female at birth, you identify as female, or male at birth and you identify as male, and you only like the opposite gender. And that's what's normal and that's what's traditional. You don't try to change your gender and you don't like the same gender. And yeah, that's basically what they think is normal.
And I wonder, has perhaps that definition of normal, I'm sure you don't agree with it, but have you, how has your progression gone from hearing about it, thinking about it, processing it? I wonder, how have you gone through these steps, and whether you take these to heart?
Growing up in that community, I definitely have until I was like a really old teenager. Like the society is so heteronormative. It doesn't really allow you to think for yourself until you're really grown and you have time to like really process who you are. Like, it's not the same as here, where even at a young age you're allowed to think for yourselves and you're allowed to express yourselves. Like, if you are a boy in that area, you're not allowed to like wear pink, you're not allowed to paint your nails, you're like, even if you look at nail polish, you're like, what are you doing, you know what I mean? Like, I have a brother, he's 5 years younger than me, so when I was like a child, like maybe 8, I would like dress him up in my clothes and like pretend he's like my Barbie, but like he talks and walks, so it's better. But I'd get scolded because my parents were like, what are you doing, he's not a girl. So like, even though he was a child and I was a child, we were still being put in these like boxes that Ramisa plays with Barbie dolls and my brother plays with Legos and cars, and he's not even allowed to like wear my clothes or whatever.
And for everyone else, where has your development as an LGBT person maybe fit in with your development in other aspects of your character and becoming an adult?
There's a lot of like self-discovery. I had to like come to terms with like my identity, because like as a kid, I was that kid who like was not so like masculine and boy-like. A majority of my friends were girls, and I would talk about like all that stuff. And to me, like in high school or middle school, like they would be talking about their like cup size or like periods, and I was like, that's normal. I don't have any like thing against that. And then like I definitely have one vivid memory. Like when I was 5, I had a sitter. Her name was Julie. She was also Vietnamese, and I was playing Barbie with her. And then when her friends came to the window to say hi, she told me, go hide. Like, and I was so confused. It's like I was just playing with dolls, and to me that was like the normalest thing ever. But then like kind of like as I grew up and as Ramisa, I got to learn more. I got to really step away from like the traditional values of my family and what society had taught me to believe, and expose myself to like what I felt like was for me, especially going to college and having that freedom, like going away from home for the first time and like really like being able to be like, I can be myself and I don't have to care too much about people judging me, because like I wanted to be more comfortable with myself. That kind of got me to like challenge a lot of like why do I think this is the thing? Like, why do I think that like not talking about emotions or crying is a bad thing? It's because that's what I was taught. But like, as I like got to know myself more, I was like, no, I actually like crying. It's really cool. It's good. It feels good when I cry and let out like what I'm feeling. So I'm not like bottling everything in all the time, because I used to do that a lot, especially in middle school and high school. And it would sometimes get to be like so overwhelming that like I would get really bad like bouts of like depressive like episodes. And I've never been like formally diagnosed, but like I would just feel really sad about my life and feel like I'm living a lie, and like I'm just going through the paces and not really thinking for myself. And nowadays it's very different, because like I can wear skirts if I so choose to. I can grow out my nails and my hair. I can do all these things that are seen as feminine and be like, no, that's just me. There does not need to be this like binary description of like, that's for girls, this is for boys. This is a thing, and I want to do it. I like doing it. I feel comfortable doing it. And it definitely isn't always easy, because you can definitely feel when people stare at you, or like, you know, you have that like sixth sense, like they're talking about me behind my back. And it's especially apparent knowing a lot of different languages, being able to like hear certain phrases and like know they're talking about you, and it doesn't make it any easier. But at the end of it, I'm like reminding myself like, this is what I chose. This is who I am. And I want to put it out there, and like, you can take it or leave it, because at the end of the day, it's my choice.
May, I wonder if you can share any experiences where you have felt restricted by other people's standards of who you are. It doesn't necessarily have to relate to gender identity or sexuality, but maybe how other people's perception of you has not allowed you to be who you think you are. Or maybe not even you, but maybe something you've seen.
Well, I'm born in a very, very traditional family, a very traditional Chinese family. Not only that, a lot of the paths are already laid out for you. Not gonna lie. Like for me, I feel like I've lived most of my parents' path, and I became the daughter they're proud of, because I'm always compared to my cousins, the other person's daughter, where like other families talk about. My mom takes a lot of pride in that. However, until like as I've grown older, I've realized there's a lot of things that isn't my choices. And even with when I went to college, I've always wondered if it's something that I'm used to or it's something that I want to do. And not only that, like I listening to other people's experiences, I can tell like the hardship that they have to go through to even like come out with their family. And like for my family, I was just thinking of my family, like what happened if someone in our family was identified other than male and female. I was thinking about that, and I was thinking like how my parents would take it, and I can already know that my parents are just not going to take that as like even a considerable factor, because for my parents, like even being like Chinese, when you get older, like who your partner's going to be has to be Chinese. Like my parents have, like even my dad, like before he passed away, the last words he left for me was, "May, if you marry an American, I'm just gonna let you know that even if I die, I'm gonna disown you." I was like, wow, you know, like in my family, it was like a big deal. And I mean, personally for me, it's not a big problem for me because I don't take interest, I guess. Like it depends, I don't know, you know, but like, so then like I always wonder is like, because like for me, I also like for like my partners I had before, it's always been like Chinese, you know. And then I always wonder like, is that something I'm used to, or is that like, you know, I feel like I just grown up getting used to that, like the idea, I think. Because like I guess before when like I would see like a white male, I'll be like, okay, that's not an option, you know. I just wouldn't even think about it. And then I guess like there's a lot of factors. Like if your family's really traditional, I feel like it's gonna be really hard, because like for them to even accept you marrying a partner that's like not from your race. And not only that, my family, they also, even if it's like a Chinese female, my family would do a whole status check. Like they have to be like equal to you academically, socially. They have to be like able to marry into our family at the same level. Like she has to be at the same level as our family. Like even for my brother, I feel bad for him because like my sister-in-law right now, like she's really nice and stuff, but my brother didn't technically marry any of his girlfriends he had. He married someone my mom kind of picked out of like the whole circle that he went into blind dates with. So like I never asked my brother, but like I really want to ask him, like, did you like actually like liked my sister-in-law in general, you know? Because in my family, I think they like love is not a thing. It's more like, because like my mom married my dad was also arranged. Like caring for my mom didn't want to marry my dad before, but she was forced to. But then the good thing is that my dad ended up being a really good male person. But then like if you think about it, what happened if my dad was like that abusive kind of person, and then my mom just had to marry it over because she was forced to, you know? So like I feel like there's many factors that's gonna come in. Like for traditional families, they have to be able to accept like some other things before they're able to accept like queer community in general. I think that's more my family. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of us can relate, especially as as Asian Americans, and we have this idea of tradition behind it. In a lot of Asian American narratives, I feel like I see tradition crops up a lot. I've mentioned before, and I know the idea of tradition. Following tradition can be an empowering narrative as well as breaking tradition. So I wonder, I put out the question to you, what do you wish you saw more of in your ideas of tradition?
Acceptance, just like acceptance.
The expansion of like respect, because we know like a lot of like East Asian and like in general, like from my experience, like East Asian, Southeast Asian, and even South Asian, like the idea of like you respect your elders because they're older than you, they know more, and like you should give them that respect. You respect your parents, but like I wish that respect was a two-way street. Like I respect you as long as you respect me, and you don't have to like what I'm doing, but like you can accept it, respect me for my choices, and like learn to like, you are my son. I may not like what you're doing, but I respect that you're still my son, and I still love you, and I respect you for who you are, exactly for who you are. I don't care if you change. I don't want you to change. I want you to be who you are. I want you to be happy. And like, that's that kind of respect that I wish was more so like both ways. Because a lot of times, like, I respect my dad, even though he has a lot of bad habits, bad tendencies. Like, that's kind of something that, like, traditionally wise, is like, I just respect you and I accept the things you do. I don't have to like them all the time. And I think that's kind of the difference, is like breaking that tradition. Is like, you don't get that utmost respect of like unconditional. You are still my dad, but there are things that I will not just stand for, and I will talk to you about it in a sense, like call you out. But there are things that's like, I wish that respect was two-way.
Validity of personal experiences. I feel like how traditional parents were like, they say like we're not valid because our experiences are very different from them, and I feel like our tradition needs to put more emphasis on our personal experiences, because even though our personal experiences are different from them, there's a lot to be learned from personal experiences. Also, not everyone is gonna have like the same experiences as our parents, because we're balancing multicultural identities as being Asian American. So there's definitely a lot of like ideas that's gonna be crossed, and things that we might not like believe in within our traditional like roles that our parents want us to be.
We've talked a little bit about how our generation and how we relate to experience, our parents, our families, people before us. We just talked about these kind of respect and validity of experiences. I think those are things that a lot of people in the general population and general Asian American population can relate to. So I wonder, do you see these changed perspectives in other people in the Asian American community?
I'm gonna say not really, just because like I feel like even in other Asian American like other Asian spaces, there's not a lot of safe spaces for me to be open sometimes, and it's kind of hard for me to explain my own personal experiences, just because sometimes like a lot of like cultural organizations tend to be more cis-normative, and they also tend to like sometimes they fail to explain more like the LGBTQ plus narratives, or they probably fail to include the narratives, or sometimes we have to be our own representation within these organizations, and that might be tough for some of us, because sometimes we've gone through like traumatizing events of coming out to your family or trying to explain things to your family doesn't get it. Me like, oh, it's better to like not share these things with like these cultural orgs that like they don't even try to include you in the first place. Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that you feel that way, especially in cultural organizations that, you know, we in ASACC specifically made so we would feel heard. So I wonder, how does that make you feel on a more personal level, and what do you wish you could see?
Maybe like more workshops, like workshops about like how to be better listeners. Maybe, I'm not sure. There's a lot of changes that could be happen that we can implicate within the Asian American community, like maybe to be more inclusive, to be more validated, I guess.
Does anyone else have any other ideas?
I think like what BSA did was really like kind of a step in the right direction, and a lot of other like orgs have had like symbols like challenging XYZ in our community, and that comes from like anti-Black sentiment, or like colorism, or like even like what we're talking about, like queer identity. I think that's like a step in the right direction for especially these cultural orgs to like kind of like invite this platform and create this safe space, and like knowingly, intentionally create it. Like, we're not here to bash on people or to out people. We're here to kind of address like, what do we see, whether you're an ally or identifying in our community and kind of like addressing like those bigger like issues, that like those core things that like validity, acceptance, like can be translated beyond just whether or not that's your identity or not. Like what Harmony said about validity is like a lot of times like I will share my struggles with my parents, and them being immigrants, and like it's like I had it so much harder in Vietnam. I had to immigrate. I had to work in a kitchen since I was 15, and all you have to do is like focus on school, and you can't even do that. That's like a big thing that I've heard like a lot of my life, and it's like I'm also a person, and this is my experience, and it's like this is affecting me. I want you to understand that and like help me, because I know that you had it much worse, as you said. Like I've heard your stories, and it's kind of become like in like subtle Asian memes or like anything like that. It's kind of like how you got to school, waiting at the bus or like a car, how your parents got to school, walked through valleys and mountains in a blizzard. And it's kind of like, please validate our experiences, because our experiences are different from yours. And like that identity is like where you inherently will think yourselves more Asian. And then over time, you might view yourselves a little bit more American, but we are Asian American. And so like having that difference in culture clash is important to kind of recognize, especially among our generation, to talk openly about that stuff. And also for like ASACC in implementation, having more access to like those resources and like those talks, and also like having representation, because having to be your own advocate is tiring and hard, because you oftentimes are speaking to like try to like say I'm here too, my voice matters, like please hear me out. And it can be very exhausting to put on like one person or a group of people. And like for me, having like more of a position in ASACC, I kind of like use that position to force that change, because I am that representation that I wish I could have seen earlier in my like education. So like I actively like will do my best to like always like, hey, my pronouns are this. If you feel comfortable, share your pronouns, to normalize like your pronouns can be other than just he, him, his, she, her, hers. And also like having that platform to be like, to talk about these issues. Like if you want to talk about this, I will support you. Here are some things that I know. And inviting people to talk about their experiences is really just eye-opening.
Johnson, I really liked what you said about intentionally creating these spaces. I think that's fundamental to what allyship is about. But I want to hear, we often talk, when we talk about creating these spaces, we talk about who we want to see leading, but I also want to hear what you think about who we want to see show up to listen.
So that kind of like, I've been in like a couple like allyship like talks already. The important thing is to invite those people whose voices are a part of it. Like for this group entirely, like Harmony, Ramisa, and I, and like we are a part of this community. And then there's May, who's an ally who might not have the same experience, but those people are equally as important, because we can find a community within each other. Like we'll understand our experiences, but May and other people like that, like coming outside and coming in and like actually experiencing that is equally as important, because we can keep that message within our community, but unless that travels outward and outside that space we create, it kind of loses its effect, because this is something that like cannot be changed in our group that we understand. We have to invite those outside perspectives and people who don't understand or may not have the greatest understanding or want to know more, so that way they're like, I never thought about it this way, and they leave hopefully like being able to enact a little bit more change in their own communities and challenging those bigger like ideals and bigger things that lead to like this homophobia or like this binary.
I just want to add into that. I feel like that's what Johnson said was very like inspireful and true, because like before I came to college, I actually only know maybe one person that's identified other than male or female, and then I've always thought like, oh, is it just like a very, very small portion of people? Until I came to UConn, where I met a lot more. And I actually haven't met an Asian that's identified other than male and female until I came into UConn. So I find that really eye-opening. And that's kind of how like where I started making friends that identify other than male and female. And I started respecting that and like changing my ideals I had before. Because honestly, like before, I had the same ideal as my family did, like on their impression how like, oh, people who don't identify as male or female, they're probably like really weird they're probably like people I shouldn't interact with until I came to UConn and I met a lot of like great people. And I feel like you shouldn't be restricted by who you are as a person by your gender. And yeah, I feel like you just need to get yourself out there into a bigger community to like experience. And I feel like that's something our parents don't do. And I think it's also because of the language barrier that forms around our family, that they don't get to like attend these workshops. They don't understand like the white views because they don't actually go on and experience it. Because like my parents, they don't have any other friends other than like their old friends back in China that also immigrated with them, it's like they don't hear things that like is changing society, and how like you gotta change your views too, because it's society now. You just gotta accept it.
I definitely agree with May. A lot of like immigrants have their circle so small, and it's usually only other immigrants, and they don't talk about issues like this. They only talk about like food and business and work and home. And I don't know how else to expand their circle or like topics they talk about, or even bring up like a topic that is so important, because they'll just like make fun of it. And I think just being brave enough to like even talk to them is just takes so much like energy and takes so much like not being scared, that is so hard.
May, I'd love to hear more about that, how you felt during that transition period, coming to UConn, seeing those new experiences. How did that feel for you personally? And I think that is a really important part of development, your personal development, that a lot of other people might be able to relate to.
Yes. So before I came to UConn, I had the same mindset, because like in our school, like we don't have many like that, like queer community. There's always like that one or two people that are like not identified as male or female. However, those people, like, I respected it, but however, like how they took action to show that they're like not male or female was, I don't know, a little bit to the extreme. I feel like it isn't the right way you should come out, I guess, but like I can't really judge that. But it's just that like they like were really mean, but maybe it's like their way, like if they don't like be like fierce, then like people wouldn't notice. But then and then I was like, okay. And then I always found because like my mom always said like I always say like that community is always like weird, and then like they're like not male, they're not female, like they're like I don't know how to use it. Like they always use the word in Chinese, but like they always say like, oh, they're like not like a person because like they don't identify as male or female or something like that. So I always like had that mindset, because like and then like I don't have any family members that are close to me that identify other than male or female. So then like after I came to UConn, and I think it's actually when I joined my sorority for say, there's some sisters that also don't like necessarily identify as male or female, and I found it eye-opening, because I was like, wow, I've never met an Asian that's not identified as like male or female. However, I didn't know until like I got to know them, became really close friends with them until like later on. And then I was like, wow, it's not like what my mom said. They're like normal too, and they have like their own like unique and like personality that I really like. And like I just realized like I feel like that you just gotta like go out there and like don't put gender into like involving like how you judge someone. Basically, like don't judge someone by like their gender, basically, because like as you get to know the person, like for me, I got to know someone before I know like who they identify as, and that's how it came to my mind shocking like moment where I'd be like, oh, maybe it isn't as my mom says it to be, because like I really like that person, and like I don't think there's anything wrong with them not being male or female, because I don't know, that's kind of like how it got me to like get more involved and be more like open-minded and be like slowly, like not slowly, I was pretty fast, so I kind of just accepted that there's people out there that don't identify as male or female, and like that's good. And like even like this semester I try to learn more about it. I'm taking like a wigs class, 21, 24, and I learned like quite a lot of vocabulary that goes into it, because when I came in, a lot of people are like, what are your pronouns? And I was always like, I'm like, what are my pronouns? What do you mean? You know? I was like, why do I need to like tell you my pronouns? Isn't it just like female? But like after I realized there's like other pronouns, it was kind of like mind opening, because like I didn't know there were other pronouns, and like I didn't really know what the other pronouns meant until like I did more like research into it.
Thank you so much, May. So I think what May has done is provide a lot of the personal experience of this sort of transition from less knowledgeable to more knowledgeable, and hopefully to an ally. I'd also like to think about, I know this video is going to be viewed by many people in ASACC and potentially board members and people with some power within our communities, right? So I want to talk about what we need to recognize when we intentionally create inclusive spaces, and then the concrete steps we can make, or maybe even people we can consult to create these spaces. I'll start off with one thing perhaps we can recognize is that heteronormativity and cisnormativity do exist within our communities. And that is something that we do need to address, and we can't just be silent about it.
A lot of the ways it's like bringing awareness, like it's not always the blatant outright homophobia or like gender phobia. It's very much so the indirect, subtle comments that people can make, the microaggressions, because it's not so much as like someone resorting to hate speech all the time. It's very much sometimes people making you feel like you're not heard, you're not aware, you're not here. And that's kind of a thing, like especially learning traditional values is like you have to be quiet, you don't want to make a scene. And I think over time that people have just learned ways not to make a scene, but like talking behind someone's back, or like all those like things that like a lot of like gossip or stuff like that, or like making assumptions. Those are things that are like very much so in our own community that are very prevalent. And it's like that passive aggression that has to be addressed, because it's not always the blatant out loud. It's sometimes a very quiet and very subtle.
Johnson, how about expanding that with some sort of concrete step or something we can do as a community?
I think part of that is language, and that's a big thing. It's like I struggled personally to to convey myself and like express myself to like my family, but like when I looked online, there were resources available that were teaching me words I didn't realize existed to describe things like transgender, asexuality, like women who love women, instead of just using the word for gay. And also that kind of comes in like what May said, it's like have that inclusive language like workshop, teach people what pronouns are, teach them that it's normal and it's normalizing to like ask for pronouns. What happens if you accidentally misgender someone? And like if you want to know someone's pronouns, like introduce your own first. Things that like start to change the language that we use around people can like be one good step towards like that starting to change those like microaggressions.
I can probably give another resource that community leaders can use. We have a great group, Queer Asians and Allies, which I was the previous president of. And I know other groups are open to collaborations. Johnson brought up perhaps talking about language. That could be a great workshop for clubs. What are some other resources that we can access on campus or within our personal community?
I mean, I personally like all those like whiz classes that talk about like the things, you know, and it's like one, you can learn more about the community, the other, it kind of covers one of the content areas, you know?
And May, were you able to take the content from your WIGS classes outside of the class?
Well, I'm technically taking it online, but like after taking that class, I learned a lot of things. Like one, like intersectionality for general. Like after I watched the TED Talk, it was like, oh, I never really noticed, you know, the two-way. It's like how like it's like almost like an intersection where you have things hitting at you both ways. And then like after taking class, you'll realize like more things you don't realize because like it wasn't talked about. But then after like they tell you like read these articles and stuff, you come into realization, wow, that it is happening like around me if I think about it. It's just like sometimes people don't tend to go think about it, and then if you do, it's kind of pretty like eye-opening. You'll realize things you haven't realized before.
Okay. I know we're drawing to the end of our discussion. Are there any closing thoughts anyone wants to offer as we prepare for the rest of our days? Maybe how are you feeling after this discussion? Have you felt like you've learned something? Have you felt like your perspective has changed? Or maybe do you feel any more connected to your community or ready to take action?
I learned that Asian American experiences are very similar, even if it's South Asian or East Asian or Southeast Asian, and we all experience basically the same thing with our families and communities. Kind of sad, but
well, for me, I definitely learned a lot. Like one of the main reasons I joined the discussion is that I want to hear about experiences from people that actually identify other than male and female, like for them to talk about their personal experiences. And then like I've always like one thing I had a question I always wonder was like, because I was like, wait, how did their like Asian family like accept like who they are, you know? Isn't that really hard? Like that's one mindset I have when coming in that I want to learn about. And I realized that mostly some parents just don't accept it, but then they're more like, this is who I am, so I'll just go my way kind of thing. So I found that really interesting.
I think for me, I found a lot of community and within and without like the queer experience. I also like, it kind of gives me like a good feeling to know that like people who are not identifying there's that good strong potential for people who are willing to learn and become like allies. And that's something that like I am personally going to take away, especially for like my role within ASACC, is like something that I kind of want to push a little bit more, is to create those spaces and kind of like in the spaces that I do hold power or experience with, is start to put forth that change. Because like every time I learn more about this stuff, it makes me more like I want to enact change, because this is my experience. And like it's also like putting it forth for the next generation, because I wish I had someone like that for me. So the best I can do right now is like be that person for someone else.
I realize we should be more intentional with the spaces that we are creating. Like sometimes, like I know like a lot of cultural orgs they don't really intend to be exclusive, but like sometimes they forget to expand upon certain ideas or experiences, so they might fall a little bit short. And so we have to, so I guess like we can be there to tell cultural orgs to be more inclusive and more understanding of other people's experiences, and we can change that.
All right, I think that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for participating. I know Shaina also has a closing statement.
Yes, thank you so much for participating and sharing your voices and your experiences. We really appreciated it. And yeah, please stay posted about the upcoming Impact 2020 discussions.
Thank you so much for watching our videos. If you are interested in obtaining PAC stars or sharing your thoughts, please make sure to take a look at the Google form below. Make sure to take a picture of you watching the video and to tag UConn PAC, UConn ASACC, and USG UConn for the chance to win a t-shirt. If you attend the live discussion on Zoom, you will also have the chance to win a quarter zip.
Thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you at our session on Monday.